Steve has sent me this sketch, or well, it's going to become a model of a car they're trying to do. So this is half of a car. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the tools you need to use freeform modeling and hopefully get a better result than what a loft will give you. So if you did want to do a loft for this, I'll just show you just in case you aren't sure. So you go into loft, and what you can do is you can then select multiple sketches, and you can see how Inventor starts to build the model by going in between the sketches. So you can go from square to round to triangle to star to any shape you want. So what Steve's done here is you've created a bunch of sliced sections of this car. Now if you do a complete loft, here's one I made earlier just down here. So you can see this is the loft. If I just turn off all of these sketches, you can see it a little better. So you can see how this model looks. Now this is for a car, so you can see it's quite rigid and jaggedy. So we don't want that. We want this to be nice and aerodynamic. And I personally think a better way of doing it is using the freeform modeling. So up here you have your primitives. So just to show you how to go about doing that, I think the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to go roll the part up past there. I think the easiest way to do this, I'm going to turn all those sketches back on just so we can reference them. Now what I'm going to do is this is half of the car, so where the YZ plane is here, if I just show that one, you can see here, this is half of the car coming towards us. Now what we're going to do with freeform is we're going to use freeform box, and we're going to do the whole car, and then we're going to split it afterwards. So the first thing I would do for this is I'd do a sketch on the YZ plane, so S on the keyboard for sketch. I would then project all of these through. So what I mean by that is I'm going to project all of the sketches that Steve's already done through into my model. I finish these couple more. I've now projected all of these into my sketch. So if I now go into, say, the Spline tool, so when you've got the Inventor first time it says line, if you drop that little arrow you've got Spline. So what you can now do is I'm going to connect basically the endpoints of all of these sketches that Steve's already done, just to give us sort of a more fluidy looking line. Now the green dot will appear at the end of the line showing the endpoint. My graphics card's quite slow so it doesn't always appear. But you just go through, click on all of these lines. When you get to the end of your spline, don't forget to right click and then create. That'll add that spline in. Now the bottom is pretty much straight all the way except for these last ones, so we're just going to add in a spline on here as well. Don't forget, right click create. Then I'm going to use the line tool just to basically join all of these up. So I'm going to connect here to here, and then here to here. I'm also going to just draw a line from there straight across to the end here. Just trim that off there. Now what I've done is I've put that roughly in the middle, and this will become apparent in a second. So I've done that one sketch, so I'm going to finish the sketch. I'm then also going to do a sketch on this plane, because when we go into here, I'm going to do exactly the same process, but you can see this isn't a straight edge, so we want to copy this as well. What we're basically doing is tracing our line, which is going to be the outline we're going to form our box around. So exactly the same process, so project all of these and then draw a spline. So I've got the spline drawn in, now I'm just going to draw the lines just to connect these parts up, and I'm going to finish that sketch. So what I'm going to do is down here in our browser, you can see we've got the two sketches I've just done. I'm just going to hide all of the other sketches which we used for that loft, so the visibility off. So you can now see if I go on to the right view, we have an outline shape of the car, and also if I go to the plan view, we have an outline shape. The reason I've used a spline and not a line is because if we had used a line, we'd get the definitely rigid edges. Spline gives a little bit more of a freeform, but again, this is just a guideline, nothing more. So if I go back into the home view, we're now going to start freeform modeling. So up here in Inventor, you've got this panel called freeform. You've got a few primitives to start with, and these are basically all the shapes you'll need to start creating freeform models. So if you go to box, first thing it asks you is what plane am I doing this box on. So for us, we're going to use this plane here, the YZ. So I'm going to start there. Then it asks you basically for the center point, so you can see the mouse point has changed to a crosshairs. So that's why I've drawn this the blue line in. So I've got the midpoint of that line, which I know is halfway between our car. So you can now see it puts in a box. These are the dimensions of the box, 75, 50 and 25. So 75 you can see is this orange arrow, so we're going to put in, I don't know, about 100. Again, it doesn't matter if it's not entirely accurate because we can push and pull and move this thing around in a second. So the width, I did measure it earlier, it's 320, so you can see that's pretty much about bang on. And then the height in our case is obviously going to be the width of this car. Like I said, we're going to be doing the whole car and splitting it at the end to give us that really the freeform model and get the aerodynamics out of it. So here I noticed one of the sketches was about 80mm long, so if I make that 160, and what we're going to do is we're going to make that mid-plane. The other thing that you can do with Freeform, which is really great, is you can add symmetry at this point. So if I hover over length, width and height, you can see the blue plane moving around, and that's going to be basically where the symmetry line is. So for us, we want it to be straight down the middle. So if I left click on height symmetry, I can do that here. Now it's going to add symmetry. I don't know if you can see the difference. There's now a grey line that runs around here, which is going to say whatever you do on this side, it's going to copy on the other. Now what's very important with freeform modeling is if you choose symmetry now, you can't delete it afterwards. So if you choose symmetry now, this whole freeform block will be symmetrical forever. You can also do it afterwards in edit form for a unique operation. For example, before you move one of the parts, you can say, all right, now for this one move, do it symmetrically. So if your part is always going to be symmetrical, you can do it here and it's much quicker. However, if you don't want that, then don't add symmetry here, just add it in for the operation where you need it. The other thing you can do is along here you've got faces. So for example, I can change that to 4, and you can see I've now got 4 faces along my width. And same with height, if I change that to, let's just say something stupid, 10. You can see how the model reacts. It also gives you a squarer edge. So I'm just going to go back and change that to 2. When you're happy with that, and again, this is just a rough shape, so just press OK. Now what I think is the easiest way is go into the right view, and basically we're now just going to use our trace line that we did earlier, and we're going to try and make this thing look about the same. So what you can do is there's a button called Edit Form. Now what you can do within Edit Form is you can move either an edge, so if I hover over here, an edge, a face, or a point, or more than one of those things at any one time. If I click on, for example, this face, because I have the symmetry line on, you'll notice it's also selected the one on the other side. Now when you go into Edit Form, you get this transform icon come up. Now you've got these arrows which will do the translation, so what that means is I can move it up and down. So for example here we want to use this one to translate, just to move this face all the way up, and you can now see we're starting to create this really organic shape. So when we're done with that, I'm just going to move to the next thing. So for example this edge here, so again I've done a face, now I'm doing an edge. You can see this part here, well that will actually let me rotate around the edge. If you don't want to see all of these items, you can actually say I just want to see rotation, or I just want to see translation, or I just want to see scale. So you can now see how it will change all of that. So I'm going to change it to rotation. I'm just going to move it to the right hand side. I'm just going to rotate this edge around, just to show you how that reacts. So you can see how it's just going to rotate around that edge. So I'm just going to undo that. So if I do this face, and then do the rotate, you can see how you can now get that sort of that windscreen shape just by using one command. So I'm going to rotate. Now obviously it's starting to look about right, but it's going to take a little time to set up correctly. If you use the rotate edge and the move faces, this one here turns it on to all, so you have all of the options for you. So you can see how now we're starting to get this shape. If I do an edge, it works exactly the same as a face, so you can see there, just adding an edge. So with the rotate and the edge translation, you can see you can start to really get the shape pretty quickly. So I'm just going to move all of these up to just line them up with our sketch, so there you go. So you can see how even with just these 4 faces we can get almost the right shape. If you do need more detail, of course, you can add another edge. So what you can do is in this drop down menu here you've got Insert Edge. So if I click Insert Edge and then say for example here, what I get is this green line appears between this blue edge and this edge here. You can see the location is 0.5. If you think of this like a percentage, so 0 is 0%, 1 is 100%, 0.5 is showing me 50% or halfway between the first edge and the second edge. If you wanted it to sit below this blue edge, you just change it to a minus figure and you can see it goes down. Now with simple, which you see here, if I add this edge, it will simply add this edge and manipulate the model in such a way to allow that edge to be created. So if I just go undo and redo, you can see there how it changes. Whereas if I insert an edge, do exactly the same function, but click exact, what that will actually do is it will add all the edges required to keep this model exact. So can you see how it's added a ton of edges in there? That's to make sure that the shape stays exactly the same. So what I normally do is at the start of a shape like this, when I'm inserting edges, I just leave it as simple, because it doesn't really matter because I'm still pushing and pulling things around. But then when I get closer to the shape that I want, then I would use the end, the exact edge, to make sure my shape stays about the same size. So you can just go through here and then start moving things around, just using the edit form and then moving parts just to get the shape about right. And you can see how this is now much more organic and smooth flowing shape. And then you spend a lot of time, and the more time you spend on it, obviously the more accurate it will be. So I'm just going to leave it there for now for this video. So you can see there we've got a pretty organic shape straight away. The other thing you can do is where we've done that sketch on the top, you can actually just use, I'll show you another tool actually. If you go to edit form, when you click on an edge, if you select loop, can you see how it selects the whole loop all the way around? Now when I pull on this, you can see it uses the whole loop, and now we can get this shape here to try and get the more aerodynamics down the side as well. So you can see just by pushing and pulling, you can get a pretty good shape that looks much more like a car than say the Loft does, for example. Again, spend more time, it will look much better. So I'm just going to finish Freeform. And you can see that's now gone grey, which Inventor obviously signifies that this is a solid. Now the beauty of Inventor is this acts exactly the same as any other solid. So I can do sketches on work planes and then extrude through it and it will cut material away. I can add material, it's really great. So there's a split tool in Inventor. If you left click on this, the first thing it asks you for basically is what the splitting tool is. Now you can either split a certain face, you can trim a solid, which is what we're going to do, or you can actually split a solid. If I, for example, choose this as our split tool, if I did split solid, it would just basically split it into two faces, whereas if I trim solid, it's going to remove half of our model. So you can see here this red arrow, that's showing us which bit it's going to remove. I want it to remove this side because I know that's where my Loft is. So I'm just going to press OK, and you can now see how that's split the part. And just to go back to how it now works, exactly the same as a parametric. If I go in here and draw a rectangle and do an extrude, and then change this to cut, whoops, you can see how it acts exactly the same as a parametric model. So I'm just going to undo that. So here's our freeform, and I'm just going to go back and turn that Loft back on. So you can now see the huge difference between doing it using a Loft and doing it using freeform modeling. You get a much more organic shape, which of course is going to be more aerodynamic. And that's really why I would use freeform modeling over Loft in this instance for creating something that's aerodynamic or aesthetically pleasing with smooth curves. So that's how I would do this car.